This is not just a story. This is a mirror into the fragile nature of love, wealth, and betrayal. A story so shocking, so unsettling, that the streets of Lagos still whisper its name. If you are watching this, pause for a moment. Tell us in the comments where in the world you are listening from, because tonight, you are not just a viewer. You are a witness. And before we begin, do not forget to subscribe, because stories like this, they are not just entertainment. They are warnings, carved out of real pain. The story begins not at its birth, but at its breaking point. It was the night the mansion lights dimmed, the night Lagos itself seemed to stop breathing. A night of confrontation. A night of truth. In the heart of Banana Island, where the lagoon kisses the glass walls of the rich, a man sat in silence. He was a man who had built empires from dust, who had worn the Lagos sun like a crown. His name was not whispered with small voices. It was shouted in boardrooms, echoed in banks, and printed in glossy magazines. But on this night, his name was drenched in shame, because he had just discovered the kind of betrayal that breaks a man not from the outside, but from the deepest chambers of his heart. His wife, the woman who once wore his surname like gold, had been sleeping with his best friend. And not just once. Not just a passing mistake. It was a fire that had burned behind his back for years. The mansion walls, tall and proud, were now nothing but witnesses. The marble floors that once bore the laughter of children and the click of designer heels now drank the weight of tears. A secret had been uncovered, and with it, a war had begun. But to understand the weight of this night, we must go back. Back to the beginning. Back to when Ngozi was still the radiant dream every man in Lagos whispered about. She was beauty wrapped in ambition, a woman who had tasted poverty but refused to stay there. Lagos had tested her, Lagos had mocked her, but in the end, Lagos had crowned her. She met her husband, Chike, not in a place of poverty, but in the corridors of ambition. He was already rising, a businessman whose hands turned every deal into profit. She, the perfect complement, walked into his life and into his empire. Together, they became Lagos royalty. Their love was painted on Instagram. Their vacations were framed in Santorini blues and Parisian lights. They were not just a couple. They were a brand. But behind the filters and the hashtags was a silence. A silence Ngozi could not shake. For in the glittering halls of her mansion, she found herself alone. Chike was always away, chasing deals, chasing numbers, chasing an empire that seemed never to sleep. The bed was cold more nights than it was warm. The dinner table was set more often for one than for two. And in that silence, a shadow crept in. His name was Tund, Chike's best friend. His brother in all but blood. A man who had sat at the right hand of Chike in every deal, who had toasted every victory with him, who had stood beside him at the altar on the day he married Ngozi. Their bond was unshakable, or so it seemed. But bonds are most fragile when tested by desire. Tund was always around. He was the one who checked on Ngozi when Chike was away. The one who noticed when her eyes were heavy with loneliness. The one who, in moments of weakness, became more than a friend. And so began the secret. A secret that grew like a hidden fire beneath polished floors. A secret of stolen nights, of whispered sins, of betrayal written not in words but in silence. For years, the facade stood. Chike, blinded by his trust, saw only loyalty. Ngozi, dressed in diamonds, carried her guilt beneath silk sheets. And Tund, the best friend, smiled at every gathering, toasted at every party, shook the hand of the man he was betraying. But Lagos has a way of unveiling secrets. The city that never sleeps has ears in its corners, whispers in its alleys. And one night, as the rain beat against the island's walls, truth arrived like thunder. A phone left unlocked. A message read too quickly. The picture that should never have existed. That was all it took. Years of betrayal unraveled in seconds. The empire Chike had built shook to its foundation. And that night, the night we began with, was born. But this is only the beginning. For betrayal is not just about broken vows. It is about broken empires. About the businesses that collapse when trust is shattered. About friendships that end in blood. About love that turns into war. This is a Lagos story. A real story. a painful story. And it is far from over. As we continue, we will walk deeper into the shadows, into the moments that led Ngozi to Tund, into the cracks of her marriage that widened until the city itself could see through, and into the dangerous game of love, power, and betrayal that would set Lagos on fire. But for now, let this beginning settle in your heart, because this is not just a tale of infidelity. It is a story of how wealth can buy everything except loyalty. A story of how the brightest mansions can still hide the darkest secrets. If you are still here, it means you understand that some stories demand more than one telling. They demand patience, silence, and reflection. If you have not yet subscribed, this is your chance. Stories like this are told not just to entertain, but to warn. And as always, tell us where in the world you are watching from, because this story does not belong to Lagos alone. Betrayal is a universal wound. This story began with confrontation, with discovery, with the night Chike's world fell apart. But how did it all begin? How does a woman with everything, wealth, power, fame, find herself in the arms of her husband's best friend? How does loyalty turn into lust, and how does lust harden into betrayal? Tonight we go back. We go into the cracks, into the silence that created the hunger. Ngozi was born in the mainland chaos of Lagos, far from the manicured lawns of Banana Island. Her childhood was survival, hawking sachet water under the sun, wearing second-hand clothes donated by strangers, dreaming of escape while others only dreamed of survival. Poverty did not just shape her, it carved her into steel. And when Chike found her years later, she was already a flame waiting for oxygen. Chike, at that time, was already climbing. Lagos had crowned him a rising prince of business. He had the confidence, the ambition, and the hunger of men who refused to die small. To him, Ngozi was perfection, beauty, resilience, a story that complemented his own rise. They became unstoppable together. Their marriage was a fairy tale written in Nigerian gloss. A wedding that shut down streets, receptions where champagne flowed like rivers, and honeymoons captured in viral Instagram posts. But Lagos fairy tales often hide Lagos scars. And within the first years, the cracks began. Chike loved Ngozi, but his love was expressed in contracts signed and towers built. He believed that building her a mansion was enough, that flying her across continents was enough, that filling her closets with Italian brands was enough. What he did not see was the emptiness that lingered when the jet landed and he disappeared again into another deal. Ngozi smiled for the cameras, but behind the cameras, she was often alone. Alone in a home that echoed with silence. Alone at dinners set for two but eaten by one. Alone with her thoughts, with her beauty, with her hunger for something money could not provide. And that hunger is what Tund fed. Tund had always been close to Chike. They had met in university, fought side by side to build their first ventures, shared failures and victories alike. To Chike, Tund was more than a best friend. He was a brother. And so Tund was always around. At every party, every dinner, every launch. In every photograph of the couple's glamorous life, he was always there in the background. And it was in those backgrounds that the betrayal was born. At first, it was nothing. A harmless laugh. A sympathetic ear when Chike was away. A conversation on a lonely night when Ngozi felt invisible in her own marriage. Tund knew her pain. He knew her loneliness. He knew how to say the words Chike never had time to say. From there, the lines blurred. He was the one who noticed her new hairstyle when her husband did not. He was the one who asked if she had eaten when Chike forgot to call. He was the one who told her she was still the most beautiful woman in Lagos when her own reflection no longer satisfied her. Loneliness is dangerous. It does not kill with a single blow. It kills slowly, feeding off small neglects, off repeated silences, off unattended wounds. And into that space Tund entered. At first with caution, later with boldness. The affair began quietly, invisibly, like a shadow beneath a floodlight. A weekend trip here, a late night there. The first stolen moment was followed by another, and another, until it became a rhythm. A rhythm that Ngozi both hated and needed. Because every stolen moment was also a reminder of what her husband no longer gave her. But with every touch, guilt sank deeper. Because Tund was not just another man. He was her husband's brother-in-arms. A man who toasted Chaik's victories, who sat at his table, who called him family. And yet, he was the man Ngozi reached for when her nights grew cold. For years, they hid it. Lagos society is sharp-eyed, but wealth can cover many sins. They smiled at parties, took photographs as if nothing was wrong, and played their roles with perfection. And all the while, behind the glimmering lights, the betrayal deepened. It was not just about desire anymore. It was about power. Because with every secret meeting, Tund's influence grew. Ngozi, once a silent wife, began whispering into Chaik's empire. Decisions Chaik thought were his own had been molded by conversations Ngozi had shared with Tund. And soon the affair was not just about love, it was about control. But secrets in Lagos have expiration dates. And theirs was nearing. The first slip was a rumor. Whispers in circles too small to matter at first. Then a photograph, blurry but suspicious. Then a message on a phone left unattended. The storm was building even though they could not see it yet. What neither Ngozi nor Tund understood was that betrayal, once started, becomes unstoppable. It feeds itself, grows larger, spreads wider. And when the collapse comes, it destroys not just hearts, but entire empires. By the end of the second year of the affair, Tund was no longer just a friend of the family. He was Ngozi's addiction, her escape, her poison. And like all poisons, it was only a matter of time before it killed something greater. This was the path to the night Chaik discovered the truth. The path to the night when Lagos stopped breathing. The night when businesses collapsed, friendships bled, and love turned into war. But we are not there yet. Because before the explosion, there must be fire. And episode 3 will take us into that fire. The discovery, the confrontation, and the empire that began to crumble piece by piece. For now, sit with this truth. Betrayal is not born in a single act. It is born in silence, in neglect, in hunger left unattended. And when fed, it grows into something that even wealth cannot contain. If you are hearing this voice, take a moment to breathe. Stories like this are not just listened to, they are felt. They enter your bones, they linger in your memory. So before we continue, pause, tell us where you are watching from, and subscribe, because what you are about to hear is not fiction. It is a real Lagos story, a warning carved out of love, betrayal, and ruin. The night of discovery was not loud at first. It did not arrive with shouting, or broken glasses, or gunfire. It arrived quietly, in the form of a phone left carelessly unlocked on a marble countertop in a Banana Island mansion. Chaik had returned home early from a business trip, a rare thing, an unannounced visit that even his own staff did not expect. The house was quiet, the air heavy with the scent of imported candles. And there, in the silence, he saw it, the screen of his wife's phone glowing in the dark, a message thread not meant for his eyes. It was not just a message. It was evidence. Evidence of nights spent in the arms of his best friend. Evidence of whispers meant only for shadows. Pictures, blurred, intimate, undeniable. Words so raw, so mocking of his trust, that they stripped the very air from his chest. And in that moment, the world he built, the skyscrapers, the contracts, the bank accounts, the luxury cars, all of it meant nothing. Because a man's empire is only as strong as the foundation of his trust. And his trust had been shattered. The confrontation that followed was not the kind you see in movies. There were no thrown plates, no screaming matches. It was darker, quieter. Pain does not always scream. Sometimes, it suffocates. Ngozi tried to deny it at first, but denial is weak against proof. The words choked in her throat, the tears fell, but they could not wash away years of betrayal. Tund, the so-called brother, tried to reason, but reason has no place in the heart of a man who has just been stabbed where it hurts most. In Lagos, betrayal spreads faster than gossip. The whispers moved from parlors to boardrooms, from living rooms to nightclubs. Chaik's humiliation became public currency. His business rivals, once too afraid to face him, now had laughter hidden behind their handshakes. His empire, built on loyalty and trust, began to crack. Contracts were withdrawn. Investors pulled out. A scandal of the heart had become a scandal of money. Because in Lagos, reputation is wealth, and Chike's reputation was bleeding. But it was not just business that collapsed. Friendship, the kind that had survived poverty and success, ended in a pool of blood. One night, in the chaos of confrontation, fists flew, words sharpened into knives, and a bond that had once been unshakable dissolved into violence. Tund, once a brother, left the mansion not as family, but as an enemy. Ngozi, once a queen in silk, was now a prisoner of shame within the walls of her own palace. And Chike, the man who had everything, became a shadow. His eyes, once bright with ambition, now carried the dull weight of betrayal. But here is the truth Lagos teaches again and again: secrets do not stay buried. They dig themselves out, they force themselves into daylight, and when they do, they destroy not just the guilty, but everyone standing close. This was no longer a story of infidelity. It was war. A war between love and hate, between loyalty and greed, between the past they built and the ruins they now walked through. And it was only the beginning. If this story has held your attention this far, then you know it is more than scandal. It is a mirror into how fragile wealth and love can be. So before we continue, I invite you, subscribe, and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. Because this story is not just about Lagos. It is about every heart that has ever trusted and been betrayed. After the night of confrontation, silence filled the mansion. Not the peaceful silence of rest, but the heavy silence of ruins. Chike stopped sleeping in the same room. He stopped eating at the same table. He stopped being the man the city once celebrated. His empire was now a carcass, his friendships were ashes, and his marriage, once glittering on the pages of magazines, was nothing but broken glass. Ngozi, the woman who once carried herself as the crown jewel of Lagos, became a ghost inside her own life. She still wore diamonds, but they felt like chains. She still drove luxury cars, but every street whispered her shame. Even her reflection began to betray her. The woman in the mirror looked older, lonelier, emptied out. And Tund, the man at the center of it all, was now a fugitive of reputation. The boardrooms that once opened their doors to him slammed them shut. The same men who toasted him beside Chike now called him a traitor. His name was poison, and his future was debt. But pain has a way of transforming people. Some are broken by it. Others are refined. And slowly, painfully, Chike began to rebuild. He withdrew from the noise of Lagos. The endless parties, the flashy launches, the loud displays of wealth, all of it meant nothing to him now. Instead, he poured himself into quiet work, into rebuilding not his fortune, but himself. Therapy sessions in hidden corners of the city. Long walks by the lagoon. Conversations with old mentors who reminded him that even kings fall, but some rise again. And in that stillness, he found something that wealth had never given him: clarity. Healing, however, was not a road everyone could walk. For Ngozi, the weight of guilt grew unbearable. She had traded loyalty for loneliness, and in the end, she had lost both. The very best friend who once filled her silence had abandoned her when the scandal exploded. The husband she betrayed now looked at her not with love, but with a quiet, distant sorrow. She remained in the mansion, but it no longer felt like home. It was a prison made of marble and regret. Her name, once associated with glamour, became a cautionary tale whispered at Lagos salons. Mothers used her story to warn their daughters. Businessmen used her name to remind themselves that even luxury cannot protect a family from collapse. And what of Tund? His fall was even darker. From boardrooms, he descended into debts. From friendships, he descended into isolation. From respect, he descended into fear. Men whispered that he had been beaten once in a backstreet, a warning from those who saw his betrayal as more than personal, but as a public disgrace. He became a shadow, a man stripped of both power and purpose. The story of these three, Chike, Ngozi, and Tund, became not just a scandal, but a parable in Lagos. Because betrayal does not simply destroy love. It destroys legacies. It poisons reputations. It turns empires into ruins. But even in the ruins, there was light. Chike, the man most wounded, chose not revenge, but healing. He walked away from the marriage, but not with bitterness. He built again, slower this time, more careful. And in the years that followed, he became an even greater man. Not because of his wealth, but because of his scars. The lesson of this story is not hidden. It is sharp, it is painful, and it is unforgettable. Wealth can buy you houses, but not loyalty. It can buy you diamonds, but not love. And it can build you empires, but not trust. Ngozi learned it too late. Tund learned it through ruin. But Chike, though broken, found strength in the fire. This was not just the story of a wife who slept with her husband's best friend. It was the story of how betrayal collapsed a marriage, destroyed an empire, and rewrote the lives of 3 souls forever. And now, as you listen to the final words of this story, ask yourself, what is trust worth in your own life? What is loyalty worth? And what happens when you gamble them away? If this story gripped you, subscribe now, because more stories like this await. Real stories. Raw stories. Stories that remind us of how thin the line is between love and ruin. And as always, tell us in the comments where you are watching from, because every city has a story like this. Lagos simply spoke first.